What is the stupidest way you almost died? Almost got my head squashed by a car due to a small pebble making me fall on the main road. Oh man, this reminds me. A dealership I worked at had two-man teams for the lube rack. Well, I was a lube tech at the time. I was setting the lift on a full-sized pickup when my teammates started raising the lift. My head got caught between the lift and the frame. Thankfully someone saw me and screamed at him to stop. I was seconds from getting my head popped like a tomato. I coughed, dislocated my C1 C2 vertebrae and spent 6 months in a body halo. How close to death that counts, but be careful when you cough. I coughed and got a spinal CSF leak. Spent about a year in constant, unrelenting pain before I found a specialist who fixed me. Cut my inner ankle on a glass cup. For those who don't know, an artery is there and I literally sliced through it. Almost bled out. Thankfully didn't though. My horse cut that same artery while he was being shod. He had a nail sticking out of the side of his hoof. The farrier hadn't crimped it down, and he took one step sideways and cut the artery on the opposite leg. He almost bled out before I got it stopped about 10 minutes later. Huge amounts of blood gushing everywhere. And I'm holding on to the foot of a 1,000-pound animal that's getting wobbly, and that I love dearly. It was really terrifying. I almost drowned in the sea as a kid. A current pushed me away from the shore. Lifeguards saved me and were slapping my face. I thought it was a punishment, but they were resuscitating me. I was at a Pink Floyd concert at the old Tampa Stadium. Was going to get a beer. I got crushed against a wall, at the bottom of a stairway, when a rush of people came up the breezeway. I couldn't move, or breathe. Probably 100 or more people in a log jam. I'm not a big person. Started to panic. Looked up and a guy looked over the rail above me. He started yelling to me to reach for his hand. He leaned way over and grabbed my hand and pulled me up, like 8 or 9 feet, and over the rail. Took a few minutes to get a breath. He had the security guy get the medic to check me over. Freaky, close to a very bad ending. One of my mom's friend's daughter died like that in a concert. My mom wouldn't let me attend one before I was 18. I still went to a couple, but that accident was always in the back of my mind. Crazy. I was at a water park in Texas with one of those super tall, straight down slides. They had multiple signs saying things like "Do not push off before sliding down." Me being an 18-year-old idiot and wanting to race my friend, I decided to push off. That extra push started my slow motion, airborne flight over the slide. I was then staring 100 feet down at concrete and my other friend who had his jaw open. What felt like minutes later, I smacked back down onto the slide and made my way down to the bottom. Thank God for the engineers that planned for suicidal idiots like myself. While drunk, I sat down outside to rest for a moment on a freezing cold winter's night. Fortunately, a passerby noticed me and encouraged me to get inside. I figure I was probably there dozing for several minutes. My boss's friend died that way last winter. Passed out in the alley behind the bar. Froze to death. Being sleepy on the road. Don't. Find a spot and sleep a bit. Edit. Thanks people for the awards. Seriously, it happened to me 2 times. You think you won't fall asleep, but you will. This is absolutely the most terrifying thing to happen. I've dozed off a few times and woke up just before flying off-road. Now I make sure if I'm too tired to drive, I immediately pull over on the side of the road and give myself a few minutes to rest, or call a friend and ask them to stay on the phone with you to keep you awake. I've only almost ever fallen asleep once. Highway hypnosis, on the other hand, has almost killed me once or twice. A few weeks ago I left work really late after a long shift and no sleep. Got all the way home and was like, shit, I forgot to do something and didn't want the morning crew to have to deal with it. So I drive back to work. Mind you, it's about 30 minutes each way, and a straight line in the middle of cornfields. I eventually have stop at a stop sign to turn left. I saw the stop sign because it's the only red thing in my line of sight and I have my high beams on. I stared at the sign for about a minute, and only realized its existence about 15 seconds before I had to stop. Going 70 miles per hour. I barely stopped in time. Luckily, if I had blown it I would have been fine since no one is in the road at 2 a.m. where I work/live. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. I was getting off the school bus and was walking around to the other side to my driveway. Suddenly the bus driver hits the horn. Scared the hell out of me and I stopped at the edge of the front of a bus and a dump truck good speeding around. I dunno if the dump truck driver didn't see the lights of the bus or whatever, but that driver made a dumb mistake that could have cost me my life. Thinking about it, my older sister was up at our driveway waiting for me. Probably would have messed her up for life after that. The school district changed bus routes to avoid students having to cross the road to get on or off the bus. Came very close, about 2 inches, to backing into a warehouse rack full of 2-ton coils of sheet metal when I didn't realize that my forklift was in reverse. I snorkeled too far out into the ocean. And it wasn't because it was a riptide. I just got distracted by pretty fish. Oh wow, this just reminded me of the one time I actually was afraid of imminent death. I was snorkeling with sea turtles in Taiwan and didn't notice I was getting too close to the coral shelf that made up the shore. There was one sandy inlet which you needed to use to get in and out. A big wave came and threw me on top of the sharp coral. I was entirely disoriented and wave after wave was just smashing on me and jostling me, which could potentially get me stuck and drowned in any number of little crevices. After what was probably 30 seconds but felt like 5 minutes, I managed to compose myself enough to start crawling away. I walked away with some scratches and a missing booty. I also accidentally left my passport in the bathroom of the visitor center immediately after. I'ma blame the trauma. I was riding my bike to either the school or the supermarket. I can't remember. I was maybe like 12-13 years old. In my town you can't really ride a bike on the street, so I had to use the sidewalk. On my way I had to ride across a bus stop with a ton of people just blocking the way for me and my bike. So I decided to hop onto the street, and up onto the sidewalk again later. Those people were blocking my view, so I didn't see a bus coming my way. I just barely hopped onto the sidewalk and the bus missed me by a few centimeters. After that, I didn't really understand what happened. A few hours later it hit me that this could have ended rather bad for me. Unplugging the washing machine with wet hands, my hand slipped onto the prongs while they were still partially in the outlet, and I think my heart stopped for a second before I yanked the plug free. Definitely do not recommend. Grown adult and choked on mozzarella cheese. Was only alone for 20 minutes. Can't imagine the obituary. Went to go visit a friend in Gloucester, Mass in winter back in high school far from my home. I was planning on staying overnight at their house, but their mother, who I now know has mental health problems, wouldn't even let me in the house because the father wasn't home working a night shift. Friend said sorry bro and closed the door. Almost froze to death waiting outside in 10° Fahrenheit at night. A cab driver saw me slumped on a bench and woke me up. Let me get warm and drive around in the passenger seat while he picked up drunk people out on the town all night. When he finished his shift he dropped me off at the train station and handed me $7 for the fare. Dude probably saved my life and I can't even remember his name. I walked into a back room freezer of a grocery store. The huge door was designed to close automatically. I knew this and went in and did what I was there to do. After 30 seconds, I couldn't catch my breath. I thought maybe I was just working too hard, so I stopped and took several huge breaths. Nothing. I felt like I was drowning out of water. I had to move as quickly as I could back outside of the freezer and feel to my knees gasping when I got out. It was only afterwards I realized for some dumb reason someone kept open dry ice in a cart inside of the freezer. Dry ice removes oxygen out of the air in enclosed spaces. I almost died from lack of oxygen and would have been an icicle when they found me. Don't fuck with dry ice. I was at Lake Bled in Slovenia and thought I could easily swim the distance between the shore and the island in the middle with the church on it. Boy was I wrong. About halfway I started getting exhausted and had trouble staying afloat. Then my body kicked into survival mode. The adrenaline started pumping, and I Michael Phelps the rest of the way to the island. I ended up paying €5 to have a boat take me back to shore after that harrowing experience. Holy fuck. Same thing happened to me. I got a cramp halfway and honestly thought this was my way out. Luckily I saw some people from my hostel in those boats and I jumped in. Fuck, just awoken a suppressed memory. I'm Italian but have been living in the UK for 2 years. Guess who looked at the wrong side of the road while a bus was coming trough? Every time I went back to Italy I risked my life for the same reason by getting used to drive to the left and vice versa. Drove on an interstate during a hurricane and watched all the cars around me get submerged. Swam under a shipyard pier at night, solid concrete above me, and lost my sense of direction. Got lucky and found my way out. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes, awards, and words of encouragement. To add more detail, a friend and I were assault swimmers attacking a ship for a training exercise at night. We would swim from pier pylon to pylon underwater. Take a breath, go under, push off, and swim 20 to the next pylon. Surface and repeat. My mask broke and I was doing it with my eyes closed due to having contacts at the time. One time I just kept swimming and felt like I missed the pylon. When I went to slowly broach the surface I found myself under the concrete above. I had no idea the pier was even built like that. Put my hands up and oriented myself. It looked dark in all directions but my gut told me to the right is where I came from. After that, I stayed on the surface. Cheers. I didn't look before I crossed the street. Walked backwards while talking to my friend, got hit by a van. I wasn't wearing my medical alert bracelet to warn the paramedics and hospital that I'm allergic to Demerol, because it looks dumb and gets caught on my backpack. Besides, what are the chances I'd ever be given that? The chances, it turns out, are pretty good if you get hit by a van going full speed hard enough to nearly rip your foot off at the ankle. I survived 7 surgeries to patch me back up, was comatose for a little bit, had some blood transfusions, massive amounts of physiotherapy. Look both ways and wear your medical alerts, folks. Going down the wooden stairs at my parents' house wearing socks, slipped on the last step and banged my head on the wall. Woke up 3 hours later with Doggo by my side desperately licking my ear. Never told my parents. My homie's autistic brother was in the deep end of a wave pool. He can't swim without floaties, so he called for help and I jumped in. As I was trying to swim with one hand and carry him with the other, I heard the siren for the big wave that happens every few minutes. So I tried to quickly swim away but it caught up and pushed us under. I accidentally tried to breathe and that put quite a bit of water in me. Just then I felt someone grab me and pull me out of the water. It was my homie. And he also grabbed his brother. So after I threw up a bunch of water and rested a bit, I realized that I almost died in a wave pool. When I was a kid, I dipped my toes into a flooded creek to see how it felt, proceeded to get sucked into said creek and nearly washed away. Thankfully, the creek had some overgrown areas, and I was able to cling to a tree in the middle of the floodwater and scream for help. This happened directly behind my house, so my dog heard me, alerted my dad, and my dad managed to rescue me. What makes this extra stupid was that I was trying to prevent my friend at the time from doing the same thing. He wanted to surf down the creek on a snow sled. I was following him, telling him it was a bad idea, and then like a dumbass, I ended up in the creek instead. He also gave me shit afterwards for ruining his stunt. Kids are fucking stupid, I guess. I waited over a week with stomach pains in college, thinking it was gas or something. Got so bad I couldn't sleep, but still waited all night to go to urgent care when they opened the next morning. Instead of going to the ER, they told me it was my appendix and asked if I wanted an ambulance. I didn't want to cause a scene and elected to drive to the ER. Got to the ER and vomited in their trash can. Was in surgery within 20 minutes. Was in the hospital for 2 weeks with an NG tube and catheter. Everyone said I almost died. Choked on a small potato at the Pizza Hut salad bar. Completely lodged in my throat. I raced to the loo and shoved my fingers down my throat. And it popped out. Walked back to my table and finished my salad. Edit, I was with my boyfriend. He did nothing. I grabbed the waitress's arm. All she did was say, "Is she okay?" To my boyfriend. Hence running to the loo to deal with it myself. In my early teens, a bunch of us kids would get super stoned and boogie board down the local river. The river was probably a class 3 at its gnarliest and an easy class 2 for the majority of the float. Well anyways, the first time we went down the river, a massive maple, a strainer, had uprooted and fallen directly perpendicular into the river. It looked super cool, so my plan was to paddle over to the crown of it and climb atop it when I got close. Well anyways, I missed my mark and headed towards the trunk instead. The water was much too deep to do any jumping and the speed had picked up around the tree. I crashed into the trunk and my body was pinned directly under the trunk. I remember being able to reach my hands out of water and could see the water line, but physically could not unpin my body. Luckily my friend was a ways back and saw everything. He successfully jumped atop the crown, ran down the trunk to where my arms were flailing out of the water and pulled my body up and over. We both crashed into the water on the other side and he paddled us to shore. God, I completely fucking forgot. When I was like 14 or 15, I found out about breath play from some dumb adult comedy show we shouldn't have been watching. I was curious and dumb, so when I went to bed that night I stuck my head inside my pillowcase, with the pillow over my face, and tied it on tightly with a bathrobe cord. Of course my dumb little fucking idiot self couldn't get it untied again. I freaked out and was just going nuts, pulling on any random bit of cord I could get my fingers into, trying to pull the pillow off, but all I was doing was compressing the knots down tighter. I remember feeling really dizzy and rapidly seesawing between desperately sucking in hot wet breaths of carbon dioxide, and then just going completely still and feeling like I didn't need to breathe anymore, like I could just lie there peacefully. Then suddenly going back to gasping for air again. Somehow I eventually wiggled enough slack out of the cord to be able to get one of the loops up over my chin so I could pull the pillow away from my mouth, and all I could do for a few minutes was just lay there and breathe. I will never forget how cold and wonderful that first breath of proper air was. Fucking dumb little shit. I stuck my head in a random beaker to sniff something in chem lab. I have been very good about wafting since. One time I was making ghost pepper hot sauce, my first time doing it, and after blending everything I stuck my whole face into the blender to get a good smell, and almost passed out from the pepper gas attack that destroyed my face and lungs.